Ed Sheeran in iHeartRadio. I'm your host, Charlamagne the God, and we are hanging out with a global superstar. Please make some noise for Mr. Ed Sheeran.
Cool.
Turn his mic on. We good? Ed, what's up, my brother?
Good, yeah.
How you feeling?
Probably in the same boat as you, like.
Tired, right?
Tired, yeah.
Lord have mercy. What time did you get up this morning?
5, but you got up at 4.
I got up at 4. I beat you by an hour. Now listen, everybody loves your latest album, Subtract. People are raving about it. Y'all love it, right? But I hear you had plans for a totally different album.
Yeah, I basically I originally started making it with Rick Rubin after Plus had finished, and I was just sort of banking, so I wanted to make a 10-song perfect acoustic album, and yeah, as stuff was unfolding last year, I just started writing songs around it, and that sort of formed into this album that I thought actually probably represents what Subtract is better than what I've been doing.
I feel like you would drive yourself crazy trying to make a perfect anything.
I think that's why it took 10 years. And I kept, it was meant to come out after Plus, and then I pushed it back, and then it was meant to come out after Divide, and I pushed it back, and it was meant to come out, it is that. You think I have to make this perfect thing, and actually making a record in a month probably was what the record needed to be.
In your creative brain, what is a perfect acoustic album? What does that even sound like?
The albums that I was basing on were like White Ladder, David Gray, Damien Rice's O, and James Blunt's Back to Bedlam. Those are like the three things that got me into being a singer-songwriter when I was a kid, and they were all 10 songs and all just, I think, perfect back to back.
Okay. Was the change of direction for Subtract like an outlet for all the emotions and feelings you were going through at the time?
Yeah, it's a weird one because it's sort of like, you can always like sense whether people like records or not when you release them because you hear them out and about. Like you would go to a restaurant and hear Bad Habits, and you go to a club and hear Shivers or whatever. But this one, you really have to be like out speaking to people to know whether people like it or not, because it's so like solitary and people listen to it when they're sad on their own. And yeah, I think it's definitely the most important thing I've put out. And I'm really enjoying. I'm doing like the big stadium shows, and then the day before I do like a theatre where I just play the album, and doing that is like bringing so much joy. It's great.
So when you're working on an album in the studio and you hear certain songs, you think to yourself like, oh, this is gonna be in an elevator, or this is gonna be in a restaurant, or this is gonna be in a cab. Like, you think that?
No, but you do. But what I'm saying is, when you release them, you can tell. Like, I started to know that Bad Habits was doing well because wherever I went, it was on. So I was like, oh, people must like it. But this is like, Salt Water is the second song on the album, and it's like a really quiet, depressing song. And I don't think anyone lifts weights to it in the gym. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
I understand writing songs in tough times. That's what you do, because you know you're a fantastic singer-songwriter, and you write and you sing about your life in good times and bad, but you went a little further, and I'm talking about the 4-part documentary about you called The Sum of It All.
Rather than like a promo package of me releasing my album, I think if I'd have made the documentary that I wanted to, it would have been a promo package, but I sort of left it in the hands of these directors and just said, I'm sure you'll find an interesting story in there somewhere. And I find it uncomfortable to watch, but I know it's good because it's uncomfortable.
What was so uncomfortable about it?
I don't know. I think it's quite weird seeing yourself cry on screen. And those things, like there are some set up shots in it. Like we go to like a German Bavarian night and drink, but those shots are the really intimate ones. Like my best friend Nick films me, and he has done for the last 6 years. So he's always there with the camera, and you don't always notice Nick because he's always there with the camera. So yeah, it was. That's why I think they got all that footage.
Did your team try to stop you? Like, no, that's too much. That's too raw.
We definitely edited down. Yeah. There was one bit where it was just like, it was like, no one needs to see you cry that much. It's just like, yeah.
Where were you originally going to take Subtract, and will we see those ideas in a future album?
Yeah. Do you know? I would love to revisit it with Rick Rubin, because what we made eventually became Multiply. It just ended up like I was working with Rick, I was working with Pharrell, I was working with Benny, I was working with Johnny McDade, and it just sort of turned into Multiply. But Rick's original thing was strip it all back like he did with the Johnny Cash albums and just make these acoustic records. So I think that would be pretty fun to do eventually, but I think I'm going to overthink it again because I'm still going to be like, it has to be 10 perfect songs.
Have you exhausted the math? Are you going to move to ABCs or something?
No, I'm moving. I'm going to do one sort of like the original record that I was making with Aaron, who I made some tracks with. The thing that we set out to do was finished at the same time, so I'm going to put that out, which is nothing to do with anything, and then I start another 5 symbols that have nothing to do with maths. So mathematics ends this year, and then next year is something completely different.
Oh my God!
Yes. Eyes Closed was the first single released from Subtract. That song was about dealing with the loss of your best friend, Jamal Edwards. How tough was it making that record?
I think that is a normal part of grief, but I just thought that everywhere I went that I would bump into him, and it wasn't actually till the funeral, until you're like putting dirt on the grave, that you're like, oh fuck, like sorry, that you can't. It's not.
You understand?
Yeah. So yeah, and the song was essentially about that. It was more hard, it wasn't necessarily hard to write, I think it was more hard to sing for the first time live, and kind of, now it's out, I have a completely different relationship with it because it's everyone else's song, but before it was out and I was singing it at like events that no one had heard the song before, it was a bit more raw, I think.
Grief comes in waves, so are you ready to perform that song? Night after night?
Do you know, yeah, it's actually weird playing like some gigs I get emotional and some I don't. It really depends. And some of the songs I get emotional about, like Cherry in that situation and at the end of the record. So it really just differs from gig to gig. Like Ches came to my Philly Subtract show and that was the first time she'd seen the album ever. So I think that added into the emotion of that night. But yeah, it all just depends on the gig, I think. Absolutely. And also who's in the audience. Like I looked down in Philly and there were a couple in the front row and both of them were crying in the first song, and that sort of sets you off as well when you see other people connect. But yeah,
you've always been so comfortable in your skin. You talk about being comfortable in your skin, but some of the lyrics on Subtract say something else, maybe the opposite. How do you respond to
that? Well, I think that there are two different, like you as a radio entertainer and you as like a father and a friend and a human, it's two different things. You have to have a certain element of bravado to be an entertainer. For me to step out on stage at MetLife this weekend, I've got it in my head to go, do you know what, I can entertain 80,000 people really well, and I'm going to stand on stage and be like, you are going to be entertained.
Yeah.
But if I was that guy off stage all the time, imagine I walked in here and I was like, yeah. I think you'd
be Kanye.
But I think I see it as a like my friends and family don't call me Ed Sheeran. That's like, I see that as like the stage, Superman puts on the cape, gets on stage, whatever it is, and then off stage I am just a human being who has insecurities and feels this way or that way, and I think it is different, and that's not to say that me as an entertainer on stage, I still connect with people on stage, but you just have to, whenever that mic goes on and you're on radio, you do turn into the personality, and then when you're off, like if you were at home with your kids being like that, it would be like, oh.
That'd be pretty stupid. Y'all ready to see Ed Sheeran? Well, I go by the name of Charlamagne the God, and we are in iHeartRadio with Ed Sheeran. Thanks for joining us. We are enjoying an immersive musical experience, a musical journey in celebration of his latest album, Subtract. Hashtag iHeart Ed Sheeran right now. You ready?
And we love you. See you on Saturday and Sunday. Yeah. We'll see you.
You're doing a big North American Stadium tour right now, the Mathematics Tour. It'll be running through the end of September. What do you enjoy most about touring?
I mean, this tour, like I haven't been back to the States in like 5 years, so I'm really enjoying reconnecting, not just with the gigs, but just in general, just being on USA soil for more than, like any time that I come here, it's like 3 days, I'll do a promo run and then I'll go back home, but I'm here for the next year and actually just on US soil, playing the gigs every weekend, immersing, reconnecting with fans, like, I'm doing the small shows and the big shows, and I'm really enjoying it. And yeah, the thing is with America, in England, you're always sort of, America's this place that no one English really ever breaks, and it is not lost on me that I can play a stadium here. I feel like I'm really grateful that people want to come and watch me, basically.
What do you hate about touring, if anything?
When it ends. Like, honestly, I love touring. I love just continually touring. I feel really lost when it ends, because I'm currently making music at the moment, and I know that every weekend I'm playing a show. But when the last tour ended, I was just sort of, what do I do now? Like, So I love touring.
But you usually used to take these long breaks. You would go on these long.
But I would still do shows in those breaks. I just wouldn't. It wouldn't be like planned shows. I would still just pop up somewhere and do a show if I felt like I needed to play a show. But I guess the pandemic sort of stopped that. You couldn't do it unless you go online and do gigs or whatever. But yeah. But the long breaks were more just about like not releasing music and not being on social media. It wasn't necessarily about not being on stage. Like there were lots of shows that I would pop up on then.
Yeah. We'll be there anyway.
Nice one.
Great. We'll get back for some music next.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
I think we'll go right into it.
That was a good song. Can you see that?
Yeah, oh yeah.